Good morning, everyone. My name is Junxiao, a PhD graduate from Zhejiang University this year. Today, I will present my paper named An Empirical Study of the Landscape of Open Source Projects in Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent. Over the years, open source software has become one of the cornerstones of modern software development practices, and open source movement has dramatically reduced the cost of building and deploying software. Nowadays, more and more organizations and developers rely on open source solutions to sustain and speed up the development of their software projects. Large software companies like Google, Microsoft, and Facebook have made some of their proprietary software open source to embrace the open source community. Meanwhile, more and more Chinese technology companies follow the trend and embrace the open source community too. Among them, Baidu, Alibaba, and Tencent, abbreviated as BAT, are the leading and most prestigious technology companies in China. Therefore, we chose BAT to perform our study. To gain insights into the landscape of open source projects in BAT, we aim to solve these three research questions. Research question 1. What are the characteristics of BAT open source projects? Research question 2. What are the developers' perceptions towards open sourcing effort at BAT? Research question 3. What factors influence the internationalization effort of projects open sourced by BAT? Therefore, we adopted a mixed method approach. Firstly, we obtained all open source projects in GitHub under all accounts of BAT, including official accounts and team accounts. Then, we analyzed the properties of these projects. Due to that, some of the research questions cannot be answered by just analyzing projects obtained from GitHub. We then sent an online survey to complement the results. By analyzing the responses received, we can form a deep understanding of the research questions. After collecting all open source projects under all accounts of BAT in GitHub, we obtained 2,008 projects in total. After filtering process, 1,000 open source projects remained, which will be analyzed in the next. In this step, we first collected projects information such as description text, number of stars, and so on. Then, we performed card sorting to categorize these collected projects by manually looking into the full name, description, and README content. As a result, we obtained 9 categories, including backend development, front-end development, machine learning, management and monitoring, operating system, and many other categories. In step 3, we collected respondents' demographic information and asked the respondents about their attitudes to and motivations of open sourcing effort, as well as their internationalization effort for projects open sourced by BAT. This is part of our survey questionnaire. Then, we recruited respondents who are publicly listed as owners or contributors of studied projects and obtained their email addresses to send email. As a result, we got about 6,000 unique email addresses and randomly chose 1,000 email addresses to send our survey to avoid spamming. After a period of 25 days, we received 101 responses. In step 4, we applied an open card sort for free-form answers to cluster them. Now, we introduce our results in this part. By investigating the distribution of the 1,000 open source projects into the 9 categories, we derived some interesting findings. That is, among the 1,000 open source projects, the dominant category is front-end development, which suggests that BAT prefer to open source front-end development projects. By manual observation, we find that most of these front-end development projects are frameworks, libraries, and tools. For example, Alibaba open-sourced the ICE project, which is a simple and friendly front-end development framework. They also open-sourced the Ant-Design project, which is a UI design language and a React UI library. Then, we use the number of stars as the popularity metric to describe the distribution of popularity of different categories. Results show that the largest number of stars is for a project in the front-end development category named Ant-Design, which has 44,000 436 stars by data collection date. Meanwhile, the management and monitoring category has the maximum median value of stars. Results in RQ2 show that 88% of the respondents are positive to open sourcing software projects in BT. In contrast, only 3% are negative to open sourcing efforts in BT. We show the differences in the attitudes to open sourcing effort across demographic factors and observe that front-end developers and back-end developers are statistically more positive to open sourcing effort in BT than software testers and program managers. Meanwhile, respondents with high experience are statistically less positive to open sourcing effort. As experience decreased, participants are more positive to open sourcing effort. Next, we present the motivations that prompt companies to open source their software projects from developers' perspective. We can find that the most common motivation is the desire to gain fame, expand influence, and gain recruitment advantage over competitors. The second most common motivation is getting feedback from and sharing what they have to open source community, while the third most common motivation is attracting more people to use participants to improve the quality and the maturity of projects. There also exist many other motivations that prompt companies to open source projects. In RQ3, we first asked the respondents if they have considered internationalization in their current projects. If their answer is yes, we then asked them to describe their efforts for improving internationalization. As we can see, 33% of the respondents have considered internationalization, and their efforts for internationalization including providing an English version of README files, using English in the code comments, using English in the issue reports, and so on. We then analyzed the collected 1,000 open source projects to compare the popularity between projects with more internationalization effort and those with less internationalization effort. Notably, we used the availability of a README file written in English as an indicator to determine the internationalization effort of projects. That is, we put projects into the high internationalization group if they have an English README file, and the low internationalization group otherwise. As a result, we find that projects with more internationalization effort received more stars than those projects with less internationalization effort. Moreover, we also investigate the percentage of open source projects whose internationalization efforts are high or low across different categories, and observe that projects belonging to operating system, program analysis, and machine learning categories are the top three groups that have high internationalization effort, while projects belonging to web page, management and monitoring, and front-end development categories are the bottom three groups. This paper reports findings of our exploratory study of the landscape of open source projects in BAT. We performed a mixed method study to gain insights into characteristics of BT open source projects, developers' perceptions towards open sourcing effort at BT, as well as the internationalization effort of BT open source projects. In the future, we plan to dig in depth on why participants with different demographics show different attitudes towards open sourcing effort, and include more Chinese companies of different sizes to investigate the generalizability of our findings. That's all. Thank you for your listening.
Hello. So we are back live here with one of the authors of the paper that was just presented about open source in Alibaba, Tencent, and Baidu. So if anyone from the audience have any questions, feel free to ask them. I'll be more than happy to direct them to the author. Let's wait a couple of seconds to see if something comes up. Junxiao, otherwise I will start with a question. Okay, so I will start with a question. If anyone else has any other questions, please feel free to follow up. So I saw that internationalization was one of the key research questions of your paper.
Yes.
Did you, by any chance, analyze where the contributions from external people are coming from and how this number of international people somehow correlate with their current initiatives to internationalize their projects?
In this paper, I have not included the research of the international people. I only have a preliminary study about the internationalization process, the definition, and the internationalization level of different categories. In the future, maybe I'll include the international negotiations about of different international people to learn more about the internationalization process.
Thank you. It's still related to the internationalization. What's your opinion about like how much overhead do you think internationalizing the project itself would bring? So I don't know, for example, which language the community is now using to communicate among themselves, and which language is used in the comments of the code itself. Like, would it bring like too much rework or too much overhead so everything would be ready for receiving international people?
Sorry, you said the overhead of the internationalization.
Yes, exactly. I don't know if you analyzed that. If you don't have any clues, it's okay. So I just wanted to know, like, if you know, like, the language that is used in the communication channels, for example, they would have to change it, or the comments in the code.
Uh, the language and the so you want to ask the relationship about the language and the internationalization process and their changes.
Yeah, let me try to bring an example. So I'm an English speaker, a second language, English as second language speaker. If I wanted to join one of these projects, I'll have to somehow get involved with the community and deal with the code. I don't know currently which languages are used, for example, in a mailing list or in the issue tracker, if it's English or not. If it's not English, for example, the whole community will have to change the way they communicate just to get me on board. And I don't know which language is used to comment code or to document code. So to have me appropriately on board, the community would have to change the way that they comment the code, the way that they document the code. Did you analyze if English is used for communication channels, for example, English is used for commenting the code, and etc.?
Yeah, I think this is a good question, and I find there are some projects have a tool and they have the English and the Chinese documentation. So if the international people want to onboarding the projects, they can use the English documentation to learn more about the projects. So this is the issue. Yeah, this is the issue. I find many projects didn't have the English document, and there didn't exist a tool to translate the Chinese into English. So they maybe can use the programming code, but they cannot read the Chinese comments, the Chinese documentation. So this is we want to improve in the future, to do more with the company, to make them receive this question, so they can do more with the internationalization process.
Okay, thank you. So we have a question in the chat. Did you analyze any sentiment or emotion? Did you do any sentiment or emotion analysis of the community content? So, and does that have connection? If so, with social debt?
Yeah, this question has not been discussed in our in this paper. We only we only asked the respondents about their attitudes about the open source efforts. The attitudes is simple, such as positive, negative, and neutral. We just want to know their perceptions about the open source projects and find some relationship about their demographics with their attitudes. The concrete sentiment or emotion analysis has not been discussed now. Maybe we can have more in-depth study in the future to learn the sentiment or emotion analysis of the community content, and we can learn more about the social debt, learn more about the rationale why some practitioners have different attitudes about the open source efforts. Thank you for the question.
We still have 2 minutes and something, Junxiao. I have another question. So when you conducted this survey, I noticed that you had as the target the owners of the GitHub projects open sourced by those companies. When answering the questions, you were expecting to have the responses based on their individual feelings about the questions, or they wanted them to be a company proxy for the answers?
Sorry, my about.
So did you want to have the answers from the survey to be something that the respondents were giving you their perceptions as individuals working on the project, or did you want you to have the answers to be a company proxy for what you were expecting to understand?
In my understanding, I have divided the respondents with their identities, such as they are the company employees or the community volunteers. So I have divided them apart. So yeah, I think they are most of them. Maybe the individuals or some of them are the company employees to contribute to the open source projects.
Okay. Thank you, Junxiao. So in a few seconds, you'll see a button here in the right-hand side of your screen to join a discussion after presentation discussion. So anyone interested in discussing, please go ahead and join us in this room.